Merhaba B'Shem Yahuwah. This is Revealing the Word. Today, we are going to take a journey together and discover the hidden word of Yahuwah. So put on your broad-brimmed hats and get ready to excavate the word with us, because we Shema Elohim with you. Shalom, Eric. How are you?
Shalom, Jessica. Great.
Okay, this is our fourth episode together, and we are talking about the structural overview of the Semitic language, even though we haven't gotten into the actual overview yet. Actually, what we have discussed in these last few episodes was how the line of communication was established, and we showed that Yahuwah spoke or Amar all things into existence back in Genesis 1. And we showed how the Ruach was the source that received that information, and then by his Ruach, all things were created. And then we went on to discuss the office of a prophet and actually what that word means. We opened up a little bit of the Paleo. We introduced you to some of the Paleo letters that surround the word Nabi or Nab, which was Nun Bet Yud. It means to be inspired by speech. And today in episode 104, we're going to talk a little bit about what it means to be a mouthpiece or to receive a vision from Yahuwah, which is also a form of communication. And then Eric is going to lead us into the establishment of language according to Genesis 11:6, where the language was dispersed by Yahuwah back in Babylon. So last week we discussed what a Nabi is, and Mishpaka, please be patient with me. My voice is giving me a little bit of trouble, but I'm going to do my best to push on, and Eric is going to take the weight of this particular show. We're going into the office of a prophet. Now, the Nabi, we spoke last week about how prophets in Malachi 4:5, prophet spoke of those who would appear, or a prophet that would appear in the last days, which we believe to be John the Immerser, or Yehukanan, would be the spirit of Elijah. He spoke about this spirit of Elijah, or the prophets that would come. Joel also spoke of sons and daughters prophesying in these last days. The word Nabi has to do with hearing as well as speaking, particularly a mouthpiece for Yahuwah, declaring that which one has heard. The office of a prophet is subjugated to the one who instructs on his behalf. So if a ambassador or a mouthpiece or a Nabi or a prophet were to receive a message that they were to delegate to the people, then they were subject to that person who was giving them the message. You ever heard the term, Eric, don't kill the messenger?
Yeah, that's because they used to do that. If you brought bad news, you're in big trouble, and they kill you as if you were the cause of it, almost.
Did they?
David did that, actually.
David did to who?
There was one time when he brought the news of the death of Saul, I think it was, and then the guy said that he had actually done it. He says, well, you shouldn't have lifted up your hand. But there was another occasion when the messenger got killed. That was probably to be expected, it seems.
You're right. I remember the incident. I was there. No, when Saul was in pursuit, Saul and Jonathan was killed, and Saul killed himself. Remember, he fell on his sword, and the man who witnessed it went back and revealed this to David. I think here the man who witnessed it, he was on David's side. He was one of David's men, but I think he went back rejoicing in the fact that Jonathan and Saul were dead, and this grieved David's heart, that he would rejoice at the death of a sovereign or an anointed one. So yes, you're right. So the office of a prophet, again, is one who's subjugated to the instructions on his behalf, or the one who instructs on his behalf. Well, in the Tanakh, there are several different Hebrew terms. Earlier we talked about the word Nabi, but there's several other terms that describe one who has the gift of prophecy. The particular noun that we will talk about here is the word Jose. Now, Eric thinks that these are the prophetic Hispanics in Los Angeles. Jose. It's, what are the letters, Eric?
Het Vav Zion He.
Right. Het Vav Zayin He. And the Strong's number is 2374 if you want to look that up. We also have another word, ro'eh. Ro'eh.
Well, the word Resh Aleph He means to see, behold, perceive, to allow to be seen, or to put on exhibition, like a museum display type of a thing. But you might have a Vav in there. Every time you have the O sound, you either have the letter Vav, or what somebody would pronounce as a W-A-W, Wah, or it's got a dot on the top of the letter, which is one of the vowel points with the O sound.
Well, if we do look up that word seer, we get the word ra'ah as well, which is Resh Aleph He, again, which means to see or one who sees. But in this particular term, it's in regards to the office of one who prophesies, right? So we have ro'eh, and it can be found in 1 Samuel chapter 9, verse 9, and 2 Samuel chapter 24, verse 11. And in this particular sense, this word tends to stress the visionary or perspective aspect of a prophet's experiences. So first there is the function of a seer. Seers most often acted as counsel to sovereign. For example, Gad was David's seer in 2 Samuel 24:11. He was a Jose. Jehu was also a seer in 2 Chronicles 19, verse 2. And now that word Jose from 2374 is a prophet, or one who beholds a vision. It means to gaze, to mentally perceive, to have a vision, to prophesy, to see something that is not physically present. This is important. I think it ties into the corruption that occurred in Genesis between man and the serpent, or between the woman and the serpent, between the three as a whole, because it was through communication that mankind stumbled. It was through a line of communication that was forbidden, so to speak. And if you go back into Genesis, Yahuwah tells Ha-Adam, the man, because you've listened to the voice of your wife, all things are cursed. So we see there's something extremely important regarding the instructions that were given to Adam through the voice of Yahuwah, which he was commanded to obey, to be fruitful and multiply. But we spoke about Yahuwah speaking, which is the word Amar in Genesis, and we talked about a prophet receiving the inspired word. And it's funny because when Yahuwah created Adam in Genesis, it says that he breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. Well, that word means to be inspired. And he inspired him to be. That's the breath of life, the breath of inspiration, the animating force. Well, in 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 16, we are told that all scripture is breathed by Yahuwah, or inspired by Yahuwah, and is useful for teaching, rebuking, correcting, and training in righteousness, right? So that means that the word of Yahuwah is alive because it holds the breath of Yahuwah. It was inspired. So if a prophet is also one who is inspired by Yahuwah, then he is very similar to, almost a shadow type of what Yahushua would come to be, the Word made flesh.
So another interesting consideration of this word, as you pronounced it, Nabi or Nava or Nabo, Nun Bet Aleph, the word come or arrive or import or enter is Bet Aleph or Bet Vav Aleph, Bo. Some people have said the word Bo Ruach HaKodesh. That's the word Bet Vav Aleph or Bet Aleph. It means to arrive or come Holy Spirit, as the way some people translate that. Monty Judah has a newsletter called Yavo, which is translated he is coming. Greek word, I think, is Maranatha, regarding the return, second arrival of Yeshua, Yavo, but it would be pronounced with a bet and a Vav Aleph. So Nun Bet Aleph, you mentioned that he breathed into Adam. Well, to breathe is to input, to generate, to activate, to infuse, to take something from somewhere else and bring it to this other situation. Typically, that's the letter nun as a prefix. Even though the letter pe is an open mouth, which can infer breathing, this letter nun is the concept of taking resources you might even picture from another dimension, like the windows of heaven being opened and pouring out a blessing. You picture the letter nun like a lightning strike, like energy from above transferring down to the earth, that sort of image. So to breathe, inputting of himself towards Adam, we could picture the letter nun. The word into as a prefix letter is actually the letter bet. The letter bet is to embody, but it means in, on, with, among, through. So this whole idea of bet being that container that has something put into it. So the word bet is house or sometimes body. So breathe into is nun bet, and then Adam is spelled Aleph Dalet Mem, Adam being the first man. Adamah, literally Aleph Dalet Mem Hey, is the word for land or earth material. So breathe into Adam could be seen as the letters Nun Bet Aleph, which is this very word you're talking about.
Hallelujah. That's beautiful. Yes, exactly. In Luke chapter 8, verse 11, it talks about the parable being the seed of Yahuwah, right? This seed that has to be germinated, this seed that carries the pattern. And we talked about how in Genesis, the seeds were given to Adam to eat. He said that the trees that have seed in them would be food for him, that he would be able to partake from them because they carried the pattern to produce after their own kind. Well, in Luke, Yahushua compares the seed to the word of Yahuwah, that which carries the pattern or the ability to produce after its own kind. So the word is the pattern to produce. So when we say that we keep his ways or we shamar his ways, we guard them, we're actually partaking of the bread of life, the seed which has the pattern. Remember, we talked about Yahuwah communicating. There had to be a receiving end. There had to be someone to receive the word, and that is the Ruach. And then the Ruach would then manifest or bring forth, faith cometh by hearing, and faith is the substance of what we're hoping for. So if the law and the prophets spoke of the righteous one, and the righteous one, or the Savior, the Mashiach, came forth because the law and the prophets, well, that's the pattern. You see, the law is the pattern, and the prophets are the inspiration or the life forth that inspires it to be. And so if Yahushua came forth, he came forth because of the law and the prophets, because he is the produce of the seed, which is the word. He is the offspring of the word. And if we too, like Yahushua, are inspired by the word, then we will be inspired to live as a righteous one. So again, parable that was spoken of, it says that the word of Yahuwah was like a seed. So then we can assume that the word of Yahuwah functions just like a seed. Well, did you know, Eric, that word parable comes even from the Greek? It's parabola. It means to compare something similar. It comes from two words, means para. Two words, para, balo, a prefix and a suffix, para, and then balo. Para means to draw near or in the side of or alongside. And balo means to cast, as in casting seed, or to broadcast. Oh, so it means to sow something or to cast something alongside in order to draw near. So then we see that when Yahushua was speaking in parables, he was actually casting seed. He was casting his seed so that the hearer of, or the recipient of that seed would draw near, brought to the side of, or in the sight of Yahuwah. So he was drawing them near to him by casting his seed alongside. Well, in Genesis 2:7 it says that Elohim, Yahuwah, formed man of the dust of the ground, and he breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. Well, even that word there, breathe, comes from the word nafach, and it means to puff or to inflate, like you said, Adam, to fill something, to fill it up, to blow or to breathe, but it also means to cause to lose life because you're expiring. It means to kindle a fire. It means to scatter, as in scatter seed. It means to disseminate. So if we think about what Yahuwah was doing, he was sowing seed. He was scattering his seed. He was blowing his seed into the Adamah, which is also the same word for the earth. So he was sowing seed into the earth or into the man. And then it says he breathed the breath of life. It's where we get that word neshama. So he was inspiring his word, his seed, to germinate it, to live. He was oxygenating it. He was causing the seed to come alive, to dwell in Adam, that he might produce after his own kind. He told him, be fruitful and multiply, right?
Actually, the words to be fruitful and multiply were the first words ever spoken that a human being ever heard. Before I mention that, though, let me mention one other thing. You talked about the word parable coming from another language, but since how we're speaking about Hebrew, let me just mention that real quick. The word, like the girl's name Michelle, this is Mashal, Mem, Shin, Lamed. The book of Proverbs is called Mishli in Hebrew. It means to be like, resemble, or to speak in parables, compared. So it's a parable or an allegory or even a fable or a poem or an example. It also happens to be the same exact word as where I think where we get the English word marshal, meaning the sheriff. It means rule and dominion, likeness and similarity, to rule and reign, appointed as ruler. So the sheriff, or the one who's ruling over a certain area, is the mashal. But mashal, memshin lamed, also means proverb. So when you see the word mishli written in the Tanakh, which kind of sounds like the girl's name Michelle, again, just so you know what we're dealing with. But going back to the very first words ever spoken is in Genesis 1, verse 28. Elohim blessed them, and Elohim said to them, Peru uravu. It's translated, be fruitful and multiply. So that word Peru, P-E-R-U, would be the way you would write it in English, which is like the country in South America. Means be fruitful. Fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish of the sea, the bird of the sky, and every living thing that moves on the earth. Rule over, that word there is resh dalet. It's not really the word mashal there. That's a different matter. Resh dalet is where we get the word Lord or road, that which is stepped on and pressed down, flattened to make a way for yourself.
Which is what Yahushua did, right? He spoke in parables. That means that his speech was, he had dominion. That word mashal also means, it's memshin lamed, it also means to teach with authority. You know, the letter mem is the pictograph of the womb, right? And then we have Shin, which means to press. And then we have the letter Lamed, which is a goad. And so it means to teach the womb, or to press and to teach. And so dominion, to have dominion, or the dominion which one rules over. So Yahushua was excellent in speech. And he had dominion in speech because he had the word of Yahuwah in him. That word mem lamed, just if we use that word, the letters mem and lamed, and we take out the sheen, you get the word milah, which means to continue, as in a continuation of segments, which it means to fill the whole. It means sentence, which is what Yahuwah was doing in the beginning when he was Amar. It says that there was a continuation of segments. He was filling the whole. He was filling the void.
So the interesting thing here back in Genesis 1:28, when he says fill the earth, that's that word melo, mem lamed aleph vav, melo et haaretz. But when he gets to the place where he says rule over, it's kaf bet shin, kabash. That's where you get even the English words. When you put the kabash on something, that's where you make it stop, which is why he told him to do that. I find that kind of a strange thing. We're doing a pretty good job of that these days. And then when it says over, it's Vav Resh Dalet. Well, that's where, if you put a lamed in front, that's where you get the word for Lord, which is where we also get the word for road, Resh Dalet, which, like I said, to be stomped on, flattened, pressed down, which is how you make a road. You crumble things and then run over it. But the way you'd pronounce that, Vav Resh Dalet, with the dot just to the left of the Vav in the modern, Ord. Well, that's where we get the word word, W-O-R-D, in the fact that the Vav can be pronounced as a W, a V, a U, or a O. So put the kibosh and word over the fish, the birds, and the moving creatures. It's kind of an interesting thing. So there's two different words here for having dominion. One is mashal, and one is, you might say, kibosh and word, Vav Resh Dalet, but they both can be using words in the sense that we read this and it means, oh, we should just kill everything. But there's something about the significance of words in having a jurisdiction. So Yahweh himself, in relating to Adam and Hua, some people say it's Hava or Hawa, he voiced his authority and said, Yahweh said that he was the creator and the maker of this place, that he gave them instructions, he gave them his words, he made humans the speaking animal, as one person said. Of course, whether or not humans are animals, that's a different matter, but it's a life form. So humans are distinguished from the others in that they speak. Now, some people say, well, other animals have a bit of a language, especially whales and dolphins. And again, it's a different matter. We were given language that's something to be studied with alphabet, with vowels. Of course, the other animals may have something like that going on, but they don't have the way to write it down that we do. That language is what distinguishes us, especially written language, from any other creature. So for Yahweh to say, Peru uravu, be fruitful and multiply, that word ravu, resh bet vav, is where we get the word rabbi, which means great one, or noble teacher, or the one who's honored, or ravavot would be resh bet bet, which would be to multiply or to have an increase of either number or regard, where we get the words rabbits, R-A-B-B-I-T-S, rabbits, where you get fastly growing in numbers. So this whole idea that Yahuwah said to Adam, be fruitful, Peru, and from my understanding, though I've never been there, that Peru is a place abounding in flowers and gold. It was a wonderful place, especially in the past, that there's a place called Ophir, O-P-H-I-R, down there, and some suggest that Solomon sent ships there to get gold. And of course, the Spanish went there to steal gold too, back in the 1500s or so. Anyway, the point is, Adam and Hua were given words, and the first job Adam was supposed to do is actually name the animals. So there's this concept that man was told to use words, and he was given this language, or else he wouldn't have been able to name the animals. So there's been a debate whether or not an alphabet was actually original, or was it just spoken. If you just have phonetics and you don't have a symbol to represent what that phonetic is, there's still a distinguishing characteristic between one phonetic and another. Whether or not you write it down, you could say it's there by default. It's alluded to. If you use the word R instead of the word L, you could tell the difference. Ul, and even if there wasn't a inscription, your brain is going to pick up the fact that they are different sounds. Therefore, they have to be distinguished and designated with meaning or discriminatory regard in your own mind based on what your ears, and then as your voice duplicates it. So in having this discussion about was there an alphabet in the very beginning, or did Yahuwah simply speak to Adam and say Peru Uravu, Peru Uravu? There's a P, there's an R, there's a U sound, there's a V sound. How did Adam know the difference? Well, obviously he was imparted instantaneously to distinguish the difference. Then if Adam was supposed to get up and name the animals, was he given a collection of sounds, phonetic differences by which he should then name each of the animals? Did Yahuwah give Adam an alphabet? Was it Hebrew? Was it Aramaic? Was it Greek or English? Or was it some heavenly tongue? Was it some
Good question.
language that we've never heard that was before the flood?
Some frequency of sorts. Yeah, it could have been. Remember the pattern, which is to speak and to hear, right? To Shema. We need a receptacle to Shema. So remember, Yahuwah is one that is reciprocal in such that he requires reciprocity. Sow and reap, which is the perfect pattern of reciprocity. You mean you put something in, you get something out. You put something in, you get something out. So if he spoke his word, it had to be sown and then brought forth from the hearer or the receptacle. So if, just like you said, yeah, Adam, he is speaking his word. He's not just naming them, but he's speaking to them. He's declaring his word over them, and they are the receptacle of that word, right? So how then would the prophets receive revelation? That means that he entrusted them to hear correctly, to receive his word. And we just showed you that the word is inspired. It is what is inspired. It's the inspiration. Again, in 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 16, it says that all scripture is inspired by Yahuwah. All scripture, that's the same word, neshemahai. It means to be Yah breathed or breathed by Yahuwah. Breathed, that has the breath of life. So these prophets, especially a seer, one who was called a seer, who has the gift of sight, was one who was a Hoseh or a Ra'ah, or would function as a Ra'ah. Remember, these types of individuals usually lined up with sovereigns. If you remember, the Pharaoh had his magi, right? They had their magicians, they had their soothsayers, which is the same concept. It's not the same word, so to speak, but it's the same concept as one who can see or has been given sight. It means to fortune tell, to sight see, or to gaze, as in a stargazer. So they had their counterfeit prophets, newscasters, broadcasters, forecasters, and then the sovereign of Elohim had theirs. And so again, this is someone who would receive a vision. And if you want to search out the phenomena which we're speaking of, you can read the book of 2 Chronicles. It speaks of it often there, specifically chapter 20, verse 14, and chapter 29, verse 30 speaks of a seer. And there was an unusual development that occurred in this particular book. It says that David set aside some of the sons of Asaph, Heman, and Jeduthun to serve as prophets. But their prophesying, this is unique, it says their prophesying was accompanied by musical instruments and possibly was brought on and aided by these instruments. So remember, David is the one that established the tabernacle of praise, or the altar of incense, where he says there shall be a perpetual fire. In 2 Kings, he built the temple, and he says that the temple would be filled with worship for, I think it was 7 years. It was 24/7 worship, nonstop, 24/7. He had hired 250,000 musicians to participate 24/7 day and night, day and night. And for 7 years, the land prospered because of this perpetual fire. So in this particular sense, he hired some of the sons of Asaph, of Haman, or Heman and Jeduthun, to serve as these types of prophets. But these instruments, they would prophesy with using instruments and worship and music. So there is a way that you can prophesy through music. It's what we've known as prophetic worship, or prophesying, singing the word, singing with the word of Yahuwah. I think it's a beautiful format. But again, Moses himself desired that all of Yahuwah's people would have the Ruach of Yahuwah in them or on them, as did the prophets. You can find that in Numbers chapter 11, verse 29. It says, Then Moshe said to them, Are you jealous for my sake? Oh, that all the people of Yahuwah were prophets, that Yahuwah would put his Ruach upon them. So it was not something that he had and used to lord over the others. He actually had a desire that they would all have the same ability to prophesy or to receive the word of Yahuwah and to have it revealed. In Genesis 15:1, it talks about the manifestation of Yahuwah's word as if it was a living being. It says, After these events, the word of Yahuwah came to Abraham. The word of Yahuwah came to Abram in a vision, saying, Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield. Your reward is exceedingly great. Well, first of all, me and Eric wondered, how is this that the word came to Abram in a vision? Did it physically walk up to him and say, Hi, I'm the word of Yahuwah? Or did it come to him in a vision? So we think that the word of Yahuwah came to him in a vision, that he had a revelation, and that the revelation was himself, was the word made flesh, perhaps. Some say that this word that came to Abram was Yahushua manifested. In Genesis chapter 3, and we can go over that a little bit, but I just want to get through some of these verses here. In Genesis chapter 3, verse 6, it says, this is the detriment of this word, okay? It says, And when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree to be desired to make one wise, she took of the fruit thereof, and did eat. Now the Hebrew word and definition for the word here, where it says, And the woman saw, is that word ra'ah that I told you about earlier.
So when you have a word that's spelled Tav Resh Aleph, the word Tav Resh itself is a word which means to search or explore, to be an explorer. And it's an Aramaic form to put the Aleph as a suffix, usually turning it into, you might say, like a person who's doing it. So there's two ways to read this. You could say, she was beholding the tree, so that's the tav is a prefix, and she's doing the action of resh aleph, or the aleph is a suffix, and she's doing the verb action of tav resh. So you can't really necessarily tell which. Now, if you look at the modern and you look at certain vowel points, and you say, oh yeah, we know which one it was. I try to look at this where both of them are in consideration. In other words, tav could be the prefix or aleph could be the suffix. Let's look at it both ways. It sounds like she was going out almost looking for trouble. She was going out looking for something to do, to comprehend, and to understand here. So another interesting thing is where it says later on, I believe it's the book of Numbers, he said, they saw the sound of on the smoking mountain, Mount Sinai.
Yeah, I love that.
How do they see the sound? Well, I believe that word for see is, again, resh aleph hey, which can also mean to comprehend, perceive, to have something put on exhibition. And it doesn't necessarily only mean see. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is that depending on the way we choose to define words, we have a limited scope of what is actually happening, and it will make us have a certain doctrine or theological understanding based on our definition of words. And if we use Strong's or any other book, it's going to have an effect. The translation of the Bible that we use will end up affecting the way we think of Elohim, of humanity, and the role of ourselves in this world and in the kingdom is all going to be a byproduct of how we define these words. And the reason why we're taking the time to look at all these different words and to pick through and look at detail of the verses is that the more we understand about the way that this particular Hebrew language is structured, organized, ordered, and used, and then when you find similar words used in different verses, it will affect your worldview, your personal relationship with Yahweh is going to be affected by studying this language.
I agree. It's interesting you talk about her exploring in the garden. Well, if you think about it, she was in close proximity to the tree, close enough for the Nakash or the serpent to entertain her and to entice her. And again, we're talking about this form of communication. Well, we want the word to become flesh. That's why the show is called The Word Revealed. That word revealed, even if we started in the Greek and went back to the Hebrew, that word revealed is that word in the last book of the canonized scriptures. It's the book of Revelations, and it says that first chapter, first verse, this is the revealing, almost like this is CNN, right? It's something spectacular. He's saying this is the revealing of Yahushua HaMashiach. And that word revealing in the Greek is apocalypse. And so oftentimes we've heard, oh, the apocalypse, as if it was going to be some great catastrophe. Perhaps to some it will be the days of awe and the days of dread. But for those of us who are anticipating, waiting for, desiring the word to be revealed, those who are entertaining the thought even now, we're saying, oh, let the word be revealed in us. Let us also become as the word has been established. Let it be inspired in us. Let your word become our plumb line. So we desire that the word would be revealed. And that apocalypse means to remove the veil. It means to disclose something that was otherwise hidden. And again, back in Genesis, we showed you in a previous episode how the earth was tohu vabohu, void and desolate. But it says that there was darkness upon the face of the deep. Well, that word darkness, it means to be hidden. It means to be in obscurity. It means to be dead in ignorance, to be dark, to not know. So if death is obscurity, then life must be what? A vision, or to see. It means to remove the veil, to no longer be veiled or hidden from the truth. The truth is no longer hidden from you. So when we say the word revealed, we're saying we're removing the shaft, we're removing the hole, and we're showing you the meat or the crux of the word, the substance of his word. And we're hoping that as we speak these things and we get into the language a little bit more and you become familiar with it, just even hearing it, that you too are going to have an appetite or a desire to see the word revealed. Well, you said that the woman was in the garden. Perhaps she was exploring or searching for something. But it's important to understand the difference between a true prophet of Yahuwah and a false prophet, which I believe the serpent was. Nakash was symbolic of one who was teaching a corrupt word or did not have the pattern in him. That's why he was described or seen as a tree or as a serpent, as the mouthpiece. Because remember, Moses is receiving a vision of Genesis or the account of Genesis, and he's receiving it according to the ancient language or pictographs. It's not verbatim. He's receiving pictures or visions, and he's describing these visions that he's seeing. And in the Hebrew language, it's about character and function. So he sees the tree as one who is upright, in which Ezekiel describes as Lucifer. Well, not Lucifer. I don't like that word. That was inserted by the Roman Catholic Church, only used once in the entire scripture. So what would you call him? Hillel, Satan, I suppose, or whoever this adversary was in the garden. We'll say this adversary. He says, "Oh, how you were covering cherubim, how you were in the garden of Yahuwah, how you were beautiful, you beautiful tree, and your roots were deep and your boughs were wide, and all the birds they rested in you." And all the other trees in the garden were jealous of you because you were fully equipped and beautiful. And so this is the adversary of men who was in the garden as described as a tree by Ezekiel. And Moses is also receiving a vision of an entity that looks like or seems like a tree. Well, when you understand what a tree means, it means an upright one. It means one who stands upright, or a leader or a champion. We get that word ayil. Ayil can describe an oak tree as well as a stag, because again, it's not about the detail of the entity or the thing, it's about the function. And the word ayil means strong or strength or champion or leader. So when we say ayil, it can mean oak tree, or it can mean a stag, or it can mean me or Eric or anyone who is strong, or who is a champion or is a leader, a strong leader. So ayil. So it's again, it's about the function. And so here Abraham is receiving the vision, or he's describing the function of this entity that's in the garden, this tree. And he says, then the mouthpiece, the character of this entity is likened to a serpent. That word nakash means sorcerer, soothsayer, whisperer, diviner, magician, fortune teller, forecaster. It's basically witchcraft or alchemy, one who bends the elements, one who seduces with potions or magic spells. And so that's why it says that the woman was wholly seduced, because his character was one of a false prophet or a false teacher. He did not have the seed of Yahuwah in him, nor did he have the Ruach, the inspiring breath, to bring forth anything after his own kind. That's why he said, if you participate or take counsel from that tree, if you receive from that tree, you will produce nothing. You will die. It will be empty and vain. Well, guess what? It says in Genesis that the woman saw. Well, that's that word ra'ah. It comes from Strong's 7200, and it means more than just looking. It actually carries the connotation of having the ability to perceive, as in one who has a vision. Now, I looked up this word in the BDB, which is the Brown, Divers, and Briggs, and it actually means one who has discernment, or the ability to divide between two things. It means to differentiate or to know the difference, like Eric said earlier. He mentioned that, to have the ability to do that, to differentiate. But here we have a tree that's already divided. It's divided between good and evil, which tells me that she did not discern properly. She was deceived. She received a false vision. She listened to a false prophet, one who was not anointed to speak as the mouthpiece of Yahuwah. He had no authority to speak to her and to say the things that he spoke to her. His word was empty and void. Well, remember, our vision is connected to our thought process and can have an effect on our mind. So what we see, we can also even begin to imagine. Because our walk with Elohim is one by faith, then our thoughts must also line up with the word of Yahuwah in order for our sight to be clear and our hearing to be sharp. I want to conclude with Romans 10:17. It says that our faith comes by hearing, hearing by the word of Yahuwah. Well, then, if hearing is so fundamentally crucial to our faith, then we should want to know how to hear and how to hear correctly. Because remember, Yahushua said that his sheep will hear his voice.
So real quick, Jessica, what was that word again in Hebrew that you said meant to differentiate?
In the BDB, it's the word ra'ah, or to see.
Okay, so you're saying that, as I was suggesting, that it was translated as to put on exhibition.
Right.
Or to see, or
examine,
perceive, or to know. It's also the ability to scrutinize. In other words, to know what you're seeing. So
intelligent.
With intelligence, which is to say, use your mind to regard what you're beholding. So the other interesting thing about the word chazah or Jose for seer, which is the original word you started off talking about, is it's where in English we get the word hazy, Hazy. If something's hazy, it's kind of fuzzy or unclear. The letter het is the 8th letter of the alphabet, corresponding with the letter H in English, and then the Zion is the 7th letter, which is the phonetic of our letter Z. So hazy and Jose is virtually the same word, but the Jose is the seer that can see through the haze, you might say.
Yes.
Whereas the word Roi, to be able to differentiate, is going to be the same job or fulfilling the same function of not just seeing, but comprehending what it is you're seeing.
Right.
And so in the Red Dictionary, Ernest Klein's etymological dictionary, when it talks about that, it means he allowed himself to be seen, as in Yahuwah allowing his character and nature to be comprehended and to be known, is the use of that word, where Yeshua says on that great day of judgment, to some he will say, I never knew you.
Right.
The question is, what word is he using? Well, we don't necessarily know, because that's written in English coming out of Latin and Greek, and I'm not sure what the Hebrew word would be. But when we have a situation like that where he uses a very key word in the New Testament and we want to find out what is really going on here, the only way to find out what possibly he might have meant is to look up in a concordance or Brown Driver Briggs or somewhere where we can get all the words for know. For example, yada, he might have meant that, or it might have been this word resh aleph hey. Just because somebody uses an English word with a similar word as to something else we think we know what it means doesn't necessarily mean we can count on it. I'm just bringing this up as a point, a case in point, where we might want to go back and rethink the doctrines that we have taken for granted. What Yeshua specifically meant when he says, depart from me, you workers of wickedness or iniquity or anomio in Greek, I never knew you. They were claiming that they knew him.
Wow.
What does that word mean, and what does it mean for us? These words are all very, very significant.
There's a great responsibility. I think that as we dig into his word, it what comes with the joy of receiving the revelation of his word is also a great responsibility, to where much is given, much is required. And so it's not just searching things out so that we can facilitate authority or have this idea of power over, lording over with this knowledge, but really as we dig in, there's a dread there, there's a fear, an anxiety almost, because you're being held accountable. These words become so weighty. They're no longer lofty concepts, but they actually become rooted in you and who you are, and the word makes you accountable to it. It causes you to be a witness or to testify. So these words become weighty and rooted in us. They make us accountable, they petition us and beseech us to become accountable witnesses, or to become a testimony, a living testimony.
You mentioned a word, darkness, which was chosek. Het, sheen, kaf.
Very similar to Jose, huh? If you think about it. Sorry.
Well, it has a similar letter H, which is a fence, which means something is barricaded or protected. There's another very interesting word, though. You mentioned about the nachash.
Yeah.
Now, that word is written nun, het, sheen. So here's a very, very interesting case where nun can be a suffix and kaf can be a nun can be a prefix and kaf can be a suffix. So if you put these two words together and end up with nun, het, sheen, kaf, what you can get is nun, het, sheen, which is the whisperer or the serpent, and then the letter kaf means the one who's whispering to you, your whisperer, the whisper in your ear.
Wow.
And if you look at nun in front of het, sheen, kaf, it means imparting darkness or bringing hidden secrets.
Like esoteric messages, something esoteric, some hidden Gnostic knowledge, which is what Shaul was fighting against at the time of the assembly. He was coming against Gnosticism and this esoteric knowledge that Gnostics were, had to be initiated into the mysteries of God, and they misinterpreted, again, false prophets, right?
Well, so this whole idea of blending, you might say, the dark whisperer, Nahashaka, Nachash Chosek. It's Yahweh had said very clearly. He spoke openly and he gave them words. Now, there's a number of words in Hebrew that have to do with hiding things, but there's basically a different type of knowledge. I'm not saying just because something's hidden that makes it evil. If you read the first chapter of Daniel, when Daniel was taken into captivity, at one point Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had a dream, and he called for magicians, sorcerers, I guess necromancers, Chaldeans, people into witchcraft. He called for all these different types of people who were aware of hidden. The word occult is also where we get ocular. It has to do with seeing. It doesn't necessarily mean bad stuff. It's just stuff that some people can see that other people can't. Occult isn't necessarily evil. It just has to do with a different way of seeing. The point is, these guys were supposed to tell Nebuchadnezzar not only what the dream meant, but he couldn't remember the dream, so they had to tell him the dream. All these different visionaries, occultists, had to tell Nebuchadnezzar both the dream and what the dream meant, or he was going to put every one of them to death, chop them up, dismember them, and then put them to death. And he started doing it because they couldn't tell him the dream. And then Daniel said, hang on, I'm going to seek Yahuwah, because he knows. And Daniel was shown the dream and what it meant. And Daniel, for whatever reason, saved the lives of all these other occultic seers.
Right.
But Daniel was the only one that had the word from Yahuwah, told the king what it was he was searching for, and went on to be given priority over all those other guys.
That's very interesting, extremely interesting, especially because we want, in these last days, we want to be able to hear Yahuwah's voice clearly. We want to know what it is to receive his voice. Matter of fact, you mentioned the children receiving the instructions up on Mount Sinai. Well, I looked up that verse and that chapter and verse, and it does say that the voice of Yahuwah, it's different than here in Genesis 15, where I mentioned that the word, it's different. It says the word, the Debar, the word of Yahuwah came to Abraham in a vision. So the word was revealed. See that? The word revealed. But when he was receiving the instructions up in Mount Sinai, it says that Yahuwah came to him in a voice. So that's very interesting. I think we'll have to delve into that. But for now, we've run out of time. We're going to sum up this particular episode. Please stay with us as we go on this journey of discovering Yahuwah's word and the hidden things, that which requires excavation. And next week, what we'll go into what it is to receive a proper vision and to have our thoughts or our minds lined up with the word revealed. And Eric will get into the establishment of Genesis 11:6, which we didn't get to do today, but we will next week.
I would like to let people know about a certain book. If you want to get it and read up on it, it'll give you a good start on this whole subject. The subject matter is called Edenics, Edenics, as in the Garden of Eden. The author is Isaac Mozeson, Mozeson. The book is called The Origin of Speeches. You can order the book online. You can look at Isaac Moseson's website. If you punch in the word Edenics, you should be able to find it. He talks about the original language on the planet and how to prove that it's what we call Hebrew, though he calls it the Edenic language. He's a world-class linguistic scholar. If you're interested in this subject matter, look there.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Eric, for joining us. Again, listeners, stay tuned for next week. Zakar, remember the words of Yahushua. And he said unto them, Take nothing for your journey, neither staves nor scrip, neither bread nor money, because Yahuwah Elohim Amkom.
Ibarechecha Yahuwah.
Shalom.
Shalom.
You can't have one foot in the kingdom and one foot in the world, because eventually the world is going to win, and then it's going to get you killed. You have to be all in. Don't play footsie with the kingdom of God. Don't think that you can give your soul to him, but hang on to these certain areas in your life and not give it over to him. The deadliest weapon we have in our entire arsenal is our mouths. Because with it, we speak forth blessing and curses. With it, we either speak forth life or death, death or life. You've heard me quote Proverb 18:21 many times. Death and life are in the power of the tongue. So eventually, what's here is going to find its way to here. Or we're going to do something about it. And so if you've got a half Israelite, half Egyptian nature, where you're trying to straddle both sides of the fence, you need to realize that eventually God is going to provide a situation where what's in here will find its way to here, and then the condemnation will occur. This is convicting to me. I'm telling you right now. There are all kinds of areas in my life that I know that I need to be taking out and stoning. And by God's grace, I get up every day and I try to do a better job today than I did yesterday. But sometimes it is hard.